Hey guys, welcome to this very short video talking about how I want you to answer the short answer AP US history questions. This should help you prepare for the AP US history exam to come this next spring. Okay, so let's look really quickly at the question that I'm having you guys answer. I picked a fairly easy question for you guys on this first try, or really I guess on the second try. This has to do with the tensions between Great Britain and between the colonists. Let's look really quickly here at the question. Identify one factor that increased tensions between Great Britain and its North American colonies in the period 1763 to 1776, and briefly explain how this factor helped lead to the American Revolution. You'll notice that B and C are exactly the same. So you need to have in total 3 different distinct factors that led to the coming of the American Revolution within this period. A few points really quickly in order to answer these correctly. First and foremost, for each of these points, A, B, and C, you should have 2 to 3 content-rich sentences answering each one. And this is true across the board for short answer questions. 2 to 3 content-rich answers for each of these. So in other words, you need to get right to the point. You don't need an introduction, just answer the prompt very directly. Do not use bullet points, however. They will count those down. They will not give you credit for bullet points. You need to use complete answers. It's perfectly acceptable to use common abbreviations. So for instance, if you're talking about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and you don't want to write out the full name, you could use FDR. That would be perfectly fine. Additionally, you need to make sure that you stay well within the time period. 1763 to 1776, if you start talking about the French and Indian War proper, talk about some of the causes of the French and Indian War, some of the things that happened within the French and Indian War, you're outside of the time period. If you talk about things that happened in the American Revolution, beyond Lexington and Concord, which happened before 1776, then you are beyond the time period. You need to stay well within the time period in the question. And then when you use evidence, make sure that the evidence isn't just from the time period, but that it is actually essential to answering the question. So those are some of the tips that I have for you guys in order to answer these types of questions. Please have for class on Thursday at least one of these 3 attempted. And then this will be due later on Thursday. All 3 of these you need to have, A, B, and C. But rather than looking at your example and offering solutions for your assignment, let's look now at this other sample question. Please go ahead and pause this video, read both John Adams and Benjamin Rush's explanation for what the revolution really was. And then let's look at the first A of the questions. Briefly describe one significant difference between Adams' understanding and Rush's understanding of the American Revolution. They're both trying to define what it was. What are the differences? Here is one possible response for A, B, or C that would not be acceptable. Let's look at the difference between this and an acceptable answer. Adams thought the revolution was in the minds of the people, while Benjamin Rush said it would not be complete until principles, morals, and manners of citizens were established. Notice that's too similar to the documents. You want to make sure that you use language in a way that is not simply quoting the documents, but describes them in a little bit more detail. Here's an example that would actually earn the point where the previous example would not. Adams believed the American Revolution was not an actual war for independence, but rather the psychological change in mindset of patriot colonists leading up to the conflict. Rush agrees with Adams that the true revolution was not the war itself, so that's where they agree. Here's where they disagree. But he argues instead that the revolution is still incomplete until a stable federal government is established. And so that would be the distinction between those 2 perspectives. Okay, and now what I want you guys to do once again is to answer A, B, or C, it doesn't really matter, they're really the same thing, with several sentences, 2 to 3, content-rich sentences, answer directly these things. There you guys have it. That's my introduction to help you answer one of those points for class on Thursday. We'll see you then.